الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I begin by praising Allah for His uncountable blessings and asking the mercy and the tawfiq of Allah so that we can do what pleases Him and avoid all of that which brings His wrath or His displeasure. And I seek forgiveness for myself and for all of us present and all mu'mineen and mu'minat for our shortcomings and for our sins. Last week we looked at a few of the teachings of Ahlul Bayt with regard to our responsibilities towards animals, whether they be wild animals in their natural habitat or pets or animals that we may keep for our own benefit. And today I would like to further that same topic and look at some of the teachings we have with regard to our relationship with animals and the rights of animals. This is an important part of our life. It is part of our Islamic teaching. Alaykum as-salam. And it is also part of modern sensibilities, but sometimes the modern sensibilities are misdirected. So you will see, for example, that in the name of animal rights, some people say that they are opposed to any kind of consumption of meat. And it's one thing to be opposed to meat for health reasons. In some cases, there may be people who have a valid reason to avoid certain foods or to avoid meat because of their health. It's another thing to be opposed to the kind of commercial and industrial production of food which sometimes abuses animals, that is certainly something that is not recommended and perhaps not even allowed in Islam, depending on the way that the animals are treated. But it is an entirely different thing to say that I am opposed to the consumption of meat in principle because it goes against animal rights. That is not a recognition of the right of an animal, but in fact, that is an appropriation of a decision that belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by a human being. Because even if I don't consume animals, many animals will be born, many animals will die, they will be hunted and they will be consumed by other animals. So within that framework, within that ecosystem, human beings also have a role. And if we consume animals ethically and without abusing them, then we are raising those animals and we are also slaughtering and then consuming those animals. If human beings were not to consume animals, then many of those animals, they would never even be born. They would never even exist. And of course, they would also not end up being slaughtered and not end up being consumed. Now, who can make that determination? That is it better for those animals not to exist? Or is it better for them to be raised, to be brought up for food, and then to be slaughtered or to be consumed? That is a decision that can only be made by the one who has created and given life to those animals and to those beings. Chickens, for example, sheep, cows, if it weren't for human consumption, then there would probably be a much smaller population of those animals. So it's not that people are only taking the life, they are also raising, caring for, benefiting from, but also giving benefit to those animals, and then after a certain time they are consuming them. So this is a determination that can be made only by Allah. And Allah has said that these animals, they were created to be part of the natural environment and to be of benefit to human beings, for transportation, for material benefit, for food. And so as long as you treat them with gentleness and you do not abuse them, it is part of their purpose of creation to be of benefit to human beings. So the rights of animals are not something that we think up on our own terms or that we make up pretending that they are human beings, but rather they are something that are created within the natural world by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we honor animals by honoring the teachings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given. If I think that a cat or a dog is a human being, and I treat that animal as a human being would want to be treated, or according to the laws that I subject a human being to, that might be abuse of that animal. A cat is naturally a predator. And so if I clip its claws and I keep it inside a home, or I keep an animal in a cage that is meant to be free, then I can't say that, well, I'm giving it an air-conditioned home and I'm giving it prepared food. That is not the nature of that animal. That is not the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created it. So sometimes in our modern society we find that those people who speak of animal rights, they are inventing something based on their own ideas, which are not necessarily actually of benefit to the animals, and they are not in accordance with the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we have a value system in which we believe everything is created for a purpose. Everything that is alive should be treated with respect, but we shouldn't say that this life is the only purpose of creation. And that is why in Islam, we are taught that certain foods, they are created to be of benefit to human being. And taking that life is not an injustice to the animal, but rather it is one of the ways in which we honor Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let us look at a few of the teachings of Ahlul Bayt. There is a hadith from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, in which the Prophet says, كُلُّ لَهْوِ الْمُؤْمِنِ بَاطِلٌ إِلَّا فِي ثَلَاثٍ. Whenever a believer has lahu, distraction, kind of a hobby that is not directly something that is of benefit for a person's religious life or worldly life, you're not doing it to worship Allah, you are not doing it to earn a profit, to better your worldly life, you're doing it for fun. It's lahu, it's a diversion. كُلُّ لَهْوِ الْمُؤْمِنِ بَاطِلٌ. That is vain, it is unworthy. A believer, because we live a life with a purpose, we shouldn't have time or energy for pure diversions that don't have any benefit to us. We have a life with a purpose. It's kind of like if I have a test tomorrow and somebody comes to me and says, do you want to just kill some time? I might say, I would, but not tomorrow. I have a test, so I need to be on point. I need to take care of every minute, every second, so I can make sure that I'm ready for the test. Well, we have a test for our life. And so believers, we cannot be people of vanity. But the Prophet says there are three types of lahu that are not batil. They are okay for a believer, they are good. في تأديبه الفرس. Some people, they love animals, they love horses, and so they are training their horse. They're not doing it specifically for a purpose. It is lahu, it is a diversion, it's fun, but it is not batil. Because, especially in the time of the Prophet and the time of the Imams, that close relationship and training that a person had with their horse was one of the ways that they would ready their animal and themselves if they ever needed to use that horse in defense of their family or their society. So it had a purpose, even if the person is doing it because they enjoy it. وَرَمْيِهِ عَنْ قَوْسِهِ. Target practice. In the time of the Prophet, target practice, of course, was with a bow and an arrow. Now, a person may engage in target practice because it's fun, but it's also a skill that is useful if a person needs to use that skill in defense of their family or their society or their religion. And so, although it is a diversion, it is lahu, but it is not batil, it is not vain. And finally, وَمُلَاعَبَتِهِ إِمْرَأَتَهُ. And when a person enjoys the time with their spouse, that is something enjoyable, it is fun, but it is also strengthening the bond of a family, strengthening a marriage, and that is something that, even if I don't do it specifically with the intention of worship, I do it because it is enjoyable, but it is not batil because it has an underlying purpose. And in these three examples, we have a principle that is given to us within Islam, which we can generalize as well, which is that lahu, enjoyment, diversion, it's something that you need within your life. But choose hobbies, choose things that you spend your time in which are fun, which also have some benefit to your life as a believer, that give you a skill that you can utilize, that strengthen your relationships with your family, with your loved ones, with your community, that give you a greater mental or intellectual power, that help your memory, that strengthen your body, These are the types of hobbies and diversions that are worthy of a believer, but something that I do purely for fun. And that doesn't benefit my physical health, it doesn't benefit my emotional or my intellectual well-being. It doesn't give me a skill or any benefit that I can use to better myself. It doesn't bring me closer to my family. Sometimes there are hobbies where people sit there and they play video games for hours on end that actually isolates me from my loved ones. Then these are examples of lahu and diversions that are not worthy of a believer and that should be avoided at all costs. They are pure batil, vain, and without any benefit. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Another teaching that we have from Ahlul Bayt is that when you utilize an animal for any purpose, then make sure that you don't treat it just as something at your disposal, but rather you are looking at being fair and being kind with that animal. Treat it as a living being and be gentle with it. According to a hadith from Imam Musa al-Kadhim alayhi salam, whenever a person wishes to ride an animal, a horse, a donkey, a camel, whatever animal a rider may wish to mount, then the animal will say, Allahumma ja'alhu bi rahima. The animal will pray to Allah, oh Allah, make this person merciful towards me. And that dua might not come in words. That dua might simply be the state of the animal and the fitrah, the natural disposition of the animal, but the way that we treat those that are subjected to our authority, whether they be human beings or they be animals, that will determine how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will treat us. There is a narration that Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, he saw a caravan of camels that were passing in front of him, and some of those camels, they had merchandise that belonged to Imam Sadiq on those camels. You know that in the time of the Imams, and even for many years afterwards, land was often safer than water. So trade was conducted by sea, and trade was conducted by land. And the ships of the land were camels, especially in the desert. So when there were pirates or when there were other causes for the sea routes not to be safe, then much trade was conducted by camels through the deserts of Hijaz and Arabia. That's where the wealth of Quraysh derived from, is mentioned in Surah Quraysh. Rihlat al-Shita'i was-Sayf, that's describing the camel routes. So when there was a caravan that was passing in front of the Imam and some of the merchandise belonged to our sixth Imam, the Imam saw that the camels had been given a burden to carry, but it wasn't balanced. And the Imam called his worker and he said that i'dil ala hadha al-jamal fa inna Allah ta'ala yuhibbul adl. Stop this caravan and readjust how you have set the merchandise so one side is not heavier than the other. It's a camel, it's not going to complain, it's not going to rebel, it's not going to demand overtime pay, but it is a burden and it is an injustice. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves justice, not because you're going to get caught, not because you're going to get fined, but because inherently justice is good and injustice is unworthy of a believer. So even if nobody is going to see you, nobody is going to call you out, even if it be an animal, even if I be alone, then I should be fair and I should not put a burden or an excessive burden on an animal. And this is why It is narrated that our fourth Imam, Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salatu wassalam, when he would ride his animals, especially for Hajj, then he would not whip the animal in order to make the animal understand where to go and how to proceed. But in particular for Hajj, because it was a time of worship and it was a time to show mercy, then Imam Zainul Abidin, he would guide the animal with his words rather than with a whip or by inflicting any pain. According to some narrations, the fourth Imam did dozens of Hajj without once striking the camel that he was riding upon. And there are ahadith that say that never curse your animal, never strike the face of your animal, don't treat it in an unkind way, don't speak to it in an unkind way, even if it's not going to understand your words and the language that you are using. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And the same thing applies when it comes time to slaughter an animal. Those of you who have studied fiqh, you know that there are a number of teachings mentioned by scholars that when you slaughter an animal, do so in a humane manner. There are ahadith that once there was a person who was slaughtering an animal and they were sharpening their blade within the eyesight of the animals that they were going to slaughter. And the Prophet said that don't do that here, because the animal may have seen a blade used and may know that it draws blood and it may cause fear. And even if the animal does not know and does not perceive, your doing it within sight of the animal is a sign that you are not a merciful and a sensitive person. So according to a number of ahadith, you should be kind even at the time of slaughtering. Our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa alihi is reported to have said, "Inna Allah kataba alaykum al-ihsana fi kulli shay." Allah has commanded you to do ihsan in everything. Ihsan means to do something well and also to do good. So Allah has commanded ihsan in everything. فَإِذَا قَتَلْتُمْ فَأَحْسِنُوا الْقِتْلَةِ. So even when you are slaughtering an animal, then do that slaughtering with ihsan. And what does that mean? It means to use a sharp blade so you are not causing excessive injury to the animal. Do so in a way where the animal cannot see another animal being slaughtered, where the animal does not see the blade being sharpened. And according to books of fiqh, it is recommended to give water to the animal before you slaughter it so that it is not thirsty, and to treat the animal in a gentle and not in a harsh manner. You are going to slaughter it, but فَإِذَا قَتَلْتُمْ فَأَحْسِنُوا الْقِتْلَةِ. Keep your spirit of ihsan and mercy, because the act of slaughtering can cause the heart to become hard. And Allah does not want us to become hard-hearted. If you slaughter with gentleness and with mercy, then your heart will remain soft, even if you are slaughtering an animal, because you will see that as an act of obedience and devotion to Allah, and you will do so with gratitude to Allah and with appreciation for the life that is going to be ended and that will be a source of sustenance for yourself and for your family. So it is a cycle of life that brings humility and appreciation rather than hard-heartedness or arrogance. And that is why even after death, it is very highly emphasized in Islam that you are not to abuse even the dead body of an animal. So if it's a dead animal and you see, for example, that there is a head there, and you cannot abuse that animal, you cannot abuse even the dead body, stick maybe a stick or a knife into the eyes just to see what happens, that is called muthla. And it is something that has been condemned in narrations because it is not something that is merciful. Now it's separate if you are doing so to dissect something for teaching, for research, to benefit humanity, but it should not be done for fun. And it should not be done with a spirit of amusement or in a way that is demeaning, even to an animal. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us so much emphasis on ihsan and kindness. May He allow us to always remember those teachings in our dealings with our fellow human beings, in our dealings with animals. May we be humble and appreciative and grateful of all of the bounties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. And when we show mercy even to the most vulnerable creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, may Allah cause that to allow mercy to become an essential part of our personality and our soul, so that we are servants of the most merciful Lord, and we are manifestations of God's mercy, and that we are worthy of God's mercy in the hereafter. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar. Fasalli li rabbika wanhar. Inna shani'aka huwa al-abtar. Sallallahu. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Abil Qasim Muhammad. وعلى علي أمير المؤمنين وعلى فاطمة الزهراء وعلى الحسن والحسين وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن القائم المهدي صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين. Amma ba'd. I seek forgiveness from Allah for myself and for all of us present, and I praise Allah for His mercy and for His bounties. In line with the spirit of mercy that we have talked about in the first khutbah, just two ahadith, both of them from our Prophet, and then inshallah we will conclude today's sermon. The first hadith is that the Prophet said that if there is a sparrow, even a small bird, and a person causes harm to that bird or kills that bird without a reason, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask that person and punish that person for that crime on the day of judgment. So if you want to hunt a bird, if it is a bird that is permissible to eat, then you can do so, and then you can slaughter it if you reach it alive, or you can say the name of Allah, and you can hunt it and you can consume it. But don't hunt a bird for target practice. Don't hunt a bird for fun. Don't do it and then just leave it and say that I never intended to consume it. This was just sport. That is an injustice. And the second hadith is that our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi أبصر ناقة معقولة وعليها جهازها. He saw that somebody had tied a camel, and the merchandise that the camel was carrying was on its back. That person had tied the camel, maybe they had gone in to take a nap, to get some food, and so for some hours that camel was just standing tied, so it couldn't go and get something to drink, it couldn't find water, it couldn't find some grass to eat, and it couldn't remove that burden. And so when the Prophet saw this scene, he said, Ayna sahibuha? Where is the owner of this camel? And then the Prophet said, give this person a message when he comes back. مُرُوهُ فَلْيَسْتَعِدَّ غَدًا لِلْخُصُومَةِ. Tell this person to be ready tomorrow on the Day of Judgment to have to answer for the way that he acted harshly and abused the animal. If he needs rest, then the animal needs rest as well. If he needs food, then the animal needs food as well. And I want to remind us that sometimes we treat our employees or people who are with us harshly in a way that we don't treat ourselves. This is not Islamic ethics, that I should have a good meal and those who are working for me, they should sit under the sun and have to endure harsh conditions. What's good for me as a human being is good for others. And in fact, what's good for me is also important for me to be concerned about with my animal as well. I'm not going to feed the camel the same food that I eat, but I should take care to make sure that its conditions are appropriate to its needs. So these are just two reminders from the Prophet of our teaching of mercy. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant all of us of His mercy and His grace in this life and in the hereafter. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Please come forward for Salatul Jumu'ah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله وأن عليا ولي الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر